We didn't stop going to the moon because of budget cuts. We stopped because of what we found there. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's what Charles Duke, the 10th man to walk on the lunar surface, has been saying in recent interviews.
I'm on the moon. And the excitement, the wonder, the thrill, the adventure of it all.
And after 40 years of silence, his explanation is terrifying. Duke isn't some anonymous whistleblower. He's an Air Force Brigadier General, a test pilot with thousands of flight hours, the voice that guided Neil Armstrong during humanity's first moon landing.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
When this man speaks, people listen. And at 89 years old, he's finally revealing what he saw in April 1972. Structures on the moon that shouldn't exist. A radio call to Houston that was ignored, and photographs that vanished into classified archives. According to Duke, NASA discovered something that raised questions they couldn't answer. So instead of confronting the truth, they made a decision. Stop going back. Here's his story. The Astronaut. 12 men have walked on the moon. They came. Back heroes, gave interviews, wrote books, told us about the science, the geology, the breathtaking view of Earth from 240,000 miles away. But there was always something they didn't talk about. Something in their eyes when questions got too personal. A hesitation before answering when asked what it was really like up there. Charles Duke joined NASA in 1966. Calm under pressure, technically brilliant. The kind of man you trust with billion-dollar missions and impossible decisions. His first major role was Capcom for Apollo 11. His voice was the last thing Armstrong and Aldrin heard before touchdown. 3 years later, Duke got his own mission. Apollo 16 launched April 16, 1972. Duke and Commander John Young would spend 71 hours on the lunar surface, longer than any crew before them. By every official measure, the mission was flawless. Every objective completed, every sample collected. NASA called it one of the most successful Apollo flights ever. But if you watch the footage carefully, something's off. There are moments where Duke just stops, stands completely still, staring at something off camera. Young's voice crackles through. "Charlie, you okay?" A pause. Then, yeah, I'm fine. Just looking. Looking at what? The official transcripts don't say. But what Duke saw in those moments would take him 4 decades to reveal. The anomalies. When Duke started speaking publicly around 2015, he didn't begin with the big revelation. He started with the details that had haunted him for years. The light was wrong. Sunlight on the moon should be pure white, Duke explained. No atmosphere to scatter it. Basic physics. But sometimes I'd see colors that shouldn't exist. Blues, purples. Not reflections. The light itself was colored. I'd look away, look back, and it would be different. And get this, he heard sounds. On the moon, where sound is physically impossible. Not through the radio, not mechanical noise from the suit. I heard tones, frequencies, sometimes harmonic, sometimes discordant. Duke paused. I asked John if he heard it. He did. We both did. But we never reported it. Because it was impossible. Think about that. 2 of the most rational, highly trained astronauts in history, experiencing phenomena that violated basic physics, and staying silent because they knew no one would believe them. But it gets stranger. Duke described time behaving erratically. He'd work on a task, check his suit timer, and realize 20 minutes had vanished, but it felt like 2. Other times, 5 minutes stretched into what felt like an hour. John experienced it too. Our subjective time never matched the clock. Then there was the presence. Every astronaut who walked on the moon will tell you the same thing if they're honest, Duke said, his voice dropping. You feel observed, not by Houston, something else, something vast, aware, paying attention to you. Strange lights, impossible sounds, time distortions. The sensation of being watched by something enormous. But that wasn't what kept Duke silent for 40 years. The structures. In 2019, an interviewer asked Duke directly, "Did you see anything on the moon that NASA has never acknowledged?" The room went quiet. "Yes," Duke said. "Absolutely yes." "What did you see?" Duke took a breath. "Structures, Not natural formations, not rocks that happen to look geometric. Structures, artificial, old, very old. He explained they were in the Descartes Highlands, 6 kilometers from the lunar module, on the far side of a ridge where Earth couldn't see them. We were collecting samples when I saw something on the horizon, geometric, too regular to be natural. I called it out to John. He saw it too. They drove closer. It looked like a wall or a foundation, angular, made of blocks, covered in dust, but definitely constructed. Maybe 100 meters long, extending into the surface at both ends, like we were seeing part of something much larger buried beneath. Here's the catch. Duke says they reported it to Houston immediately. There was a long delay, longer than normal. Then we were told to continue with planned sample collection. His jaw tightened. No acknowledgement, no questions, no excitement. Just move on. Duke and Young took photographs anyway. Dozens of them. Close-ups, wide shots, everything. Those photos were never released, Duke said. I've asked NASA about them for years. They say the images are classified for technical reasons. Or lost. Or too poor quality. His voice hardened. I took those photos. They were perfectly clear. So here's the deal. NASA potentially has photographic evidence of artificial structures on the moon, and they've kept it buried for over 50 years. But what Duke described next was even more disturbing. The age. The interviewer asked if the structures looked recent. Duke shook his head slowly. No, that's what makes this terrifying. They looked ancient, eroded, even though there's no weather on the moon, covered in impact craters. He paused to let that sink in. They'd been there for millions of years, possibly longer. They predated anything humans have ever built. Another pause. They predated humans. Who built them? Duke's answer was barely above a whisper. I don't know, but someone, or something, constructed on the moon long before we existed. And NASA knows, and they decided the public shouldn't. If you're wondering whether Duke is alone in these claims, he isn't. In 2017, most surviving Apollo moonwalkers gathered for a private reunion. According to Duke, they finally had the conversation they had avoided for decades. Everyone had anomalies, Duke revealed. Different things, different missions. But nobody's experience matched what NASA told the public. And we all knew we couldn't talk about it. Not because NASA threatened us, but because no one would believe us. Buzz Aldrin mentioned monoliths on Mars's moon Phobos. Edgar Mitchell spoke openly about extraterrestrial intelligence. Al Worden said he believed humans descended from ancient aliens. These weren't fringe figures. These were men trusted with the most complex missions in history. And in their final years, free from NASA, they all said the same thing. The official story is dangerously incomplete. If you want to know what those astronauts discussed and what NASA has really been hiding, make sure you're subscribed, because what Duke reveals next explains everything. The real reason. In 2023, Duke was asked point blank, is there a cover-up? Not in the conspiracy sense, he said carefully. It's institutional paralysis. NASA has data, photos, observations from multiple missions suggesting the moon is far stranger than the dead rock story. But releasing it would fundamentally challenge what people believe about our place in the universe. He paused. So they sit on it. It's not malicious, it's cowardice. Then Duke delivered the answer. This entire video has been building toward. We could have continued exploring, built lunar bases, sent dozens more missions, really investigated what's there. His voice dropped. But we stopped. After Apollo 17 in December 1972, we barely went back for 50 years. Why? He shook his head. The official reason is budget constraints. But the real reason? The people making decisions realized the moon raised questions they couldn't answer. Questions about who was there before us. Questions about what those structures mean. Questions about whether we're alone. Duke leaned forward. It was easier to stop going than to confront what was being found. Think about that for a second. According to a man who walked on the moon, who saw things that shouldn't exist, we didn't abandon lunar exploration because we lost interest or funding. We abandoned it because we found something we weren't ready to face. The truth. Charles Duke is 89 years old. He knows his time is limited, and he's spending it doing something that would have destroyed his career decades ago. I walked on the moon, Duke said recently. I saw things that aren't in any official report. I'm telling you because you deserve to know. He's direct about what he believes. The moon is not what you've been told. Space is not what you've been told. And if humanity wants to move forward, we need an honest accounting of what we've actually discovered. The structures Duke describes, if they exist, are still there. The photographs NASA allegedly buried are still in some archive. The questions the Apollo astronauts asked each other in private are still unanswered. And now, after half a century of silence, one of the 12 men who stood on lunar soil is demanding we pay attention. Whether history vindicates Charles Duke or dismisses him remains to be seen. But his testimony forces uncomfortable questions. If he's wrong, why do his descriptions match what other astronauts have hinted at for years? If he's right, what does it mean that we've known about ancient lunar structures for 5 decades and done nothing? Charles Duke kept quiet for 40 years. Now he's talking. The real question is, what else haven't they told us? Drop your theory in the comments and subscribe because we're just getting started. The Apollo missions left behind more secrets than NASA wants you to know. The moon was never empty, and Charles Duke is finally ready to prove it.